Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of our Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, more from Aviation Maintenance, Gutterdämmerung Part 1. More from Aviation Maintenance, Gutterdämmerung Part 2 framing the situation. More from Aviation Maintenance, Gutterdämmerung Part 3 the plane of the beast. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. More from Aviation Maintenance, Gutterdämmerung Part 1. This is a repost of a tale I posted to myself back a year ago. It's being posted here due to it being a two-parter tale now. November 2017. Director Special, I don't care, stop bringing up that dollar problem. When I want to hear from you on it, I'll ask. Which will be never. Because I don't care. Old boss, fine. Then I want to go back to the floor. Right now. I'm done with this project, and very special customer. Not there, manager, I was just placed in charge of the planning group and your group, Z. Without old boss, the planning group upstairs doesn't have a lead, and your replacement when you took the lead job is going back to the floor as well, so there's no one who knows how to do work for very special customer anymore. Z-Wolf, I see. Well, I suppose I can help out for a little while, get someone trained. December. Cut to scene of Director Special's office. It used to be an old and used storage room with attached other storage rooms, but was now fully tricked out. Large screen LCD TVs in every room. Even the closet. Wood plank flooring procured from House Despot instead of through the normal facilities channels covered the tile floor. The largest room had been converted into a conference room, the center of which held a long butcher block style table made of hardwood collected from various countries in South America and built with on the side overtime by aircraft maintenance support assistants and utility employees. The ceiling tiles of the room had all been removed, and markings in the metal roof above indicated where the skylights from House Despot were to be installed. HR enters, escorted by security. An exchange, and several minutes later Director Special exits the office with what he can carry, escorted by the security. Attractive assistant is also being escorted out. Simultaneously, on the floor, Director Special's son is being escorted by HR and security to the door. In the materials warehouse, the same scene plays out, this time with Director Special's son's fiancée and his mother under escort. 2 years later. December 2019. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. Another email asking for some report compiling the hours for very special customers' aircraft. I'd given them all the tools, shown them how to do it, but yet they come to me over and over for a simple copy-paste in formula. I file it off in the reporting hell where all the other reports I've been building for the past 2 years seem to end up, and then check my list of work to be done. Very special customer isn't supposed to arrive for another month, so I don't have to worry about that yet. But maybe I'll just putz around in the panel book from hell for a bit, so as to keep myself occupied officially. Unofficially, I load up Twitch on my filtered laptop screen, and set about watching my favorite streamer and his special tactics. I've heard my boss, not there, was being moved to third shift, his boss, aircraft savant, was moving to the floor, and 2 of my peers in the production lead group would be promoted to fill those positions. I, of course, wasn't considered. Which doesn't surprise me any, but it doesn't bother me too much anymore. I'd stopped caring some time ago, actually. That's why I'd turned to Twitch. I wasn't working checks anymore, so my TFTS entries were going without any updates, and my morale was low enough I didn't care to write any military stories. It didn't start off like this. At first, when I took the temporary position upstairs to help the operation, I was hopeful. I held the very special customer contract together, and even slapped together some reports and data analysis. I was pleased with these reports I was building, and at first it even seemed like they made a difference. But as time drug on, I received less and less feedback on the reports. My boss, not there, would occasionally come to me breathless with a need for an emergency report right now, and I would drop anything and everything to build it for him, and then, nothing. On occasion, I'd hear back a month or two later, being asked, "Do you still have a copy of emergency report? Could I get it from you?" Sure. Okay. A year and a few months into the gig, and we moved from our nice, private cube farm upstairs into a new open concept office where we could collaborate registered more effectively. Synergy and all that. Instead of being able to have a modicum of privacy in our cubes, the workspace became such that there was none a leader could walk through and see every little thing we were doing. Even YouTube became forbidden, even if it was for background noise as it was playing games at work. Meanwhile, I requested that he let me train people in the building and support a very special customer, which he would immediately dismiss because they're leaving soon. They never did leave. Not there lived up to his name and tried his hardest to not be around, always running from meeting to meeting, nose stuck into his phone. He had little awareness of the visits, and we discovered quickly we could dismiss most things he asked us to do as he would forget about them within minutes. His concerns were his projects, not the personnel under him, and he was always in pursuit of advancing himself. His boss, aircraft savant, meanwhile didn't care a lick about anything not there asked us to do, dismissing it all as pointless foolishness, and let us know that as well. His sole concern was packing aircraft into the facility as best as possible, and then ensuring they went out on time. Statistical analysis was pointless to him, as he could accurately estimate an aircraft visit with a mere glance. I was given admin access to our maintenance tracking program at one point, expected to be able to assist in running it, but was never actually given any of the promised training, nor was I given any tasks to assist. I found myself further and further on the outside, being informed of less and less. I was discouraged, morale was low, and frankly, I stopped giving a damn. And upon hearing about his lateral promotion, aka demotion to third shift, he would no longer be able to work the myriad of projects, I didn't care. I was on the outside. What I was doing mattered little. And then, one day, he called me into his office for my review. "Not there, so for the last year I've seen your production take a sharp hit. I've seriously marked you down in all categories for your review." Z-Wolf, yeah, you're right. I am discouraged and demoralized. I've not been putting forward my best effort. I feel like everything I'm doing here is a waste of time, aside from the stuff for very special customer. Even then, that only fills a small part of my time, and the rest of the time. Not there, well, I don't want to assume anything or ask, but often when an employee has such a sharp decline in production, it is often due to something at home. Z-Wolf, what.jpg, I just told you. My morale is awful, everything I do feels pointless. All those reports I make go off to a black hole, no one seems to care. Not their shock at Pikachu.jpg, but I tell everyone about how great they are. Z-Wolf, but did you ever tell me? It was hard to tell it mattered. If you would ask me for an emergency report, I'd slap it together, but then I wouldn't hear another peep about it until you asked me if I still had a copy of it a few months later. Not there, well, like I said, I don't want to assume what's happening at home, but that's often what affects a production drop like this. The company has lots of resources, here's the brochure, and we have no reason to be dissatisfied with our jobs as we make so much. I took to nodding and smiling at this point. Not there also, I've seen that you're still playing games at work. Z-Wolf, their videos. Background noise. So that I don't go crazy. Not there, well, they look like games. If it's not company business, it shouldn't be on your computer screen, nor should you be installing software on company computers. I looked at his computer screen behind him. On it is financing information for a 2020 BMW he's looking at. I remembered all the times he was pulling camper info up on the computer, as well when I'd walk up to talk to him. Z-Wolf understood. I checked out for the rest of the review, where he explained how disappointed he was in my lack of leadership demonstrated, and he'd give me a book on it if he had one to hand at the moment. I just nodded and smiled and didn't mention that I had no idea that was what he wanted from me. When he was done, I marched back to my desk to sign it in the system, making sure to note in my comments block what I'd said about morale and the value of my work. Later, I was told by my new bosses that I'd be returning to the floor to run check visits again. Of course, I'd also been told that I'll need to train with the rest of the production leads at various points, so that I can learn how to run the checks, despite being one of the original leads. That I needed to get some experience with simple visits before I can move on to more complex check visits, in spite of running some major modification visits for a year prior. Whatever. Things were looking up. 2020 was going to be a year of new opportunity and renewal. Author's note: what really happened with Director Special and his family and friends is beyond my knowledge. Some say it was politics, some say it was his knowledge about what was going on, some say it was misuse of funds. I'm not going to pretend to know. 'Cause I don't. Like what you read. More tales can be found here. More from Aviation Maintenance, Götterdämmerung Part 2, Framing the Situation. January 2020. It was a wonderful feeling, being back in the Bay Work Center, directing check visits. Our new planes, which had been delivered only a couple years ago, were coming due for their 2-year checks, and there was a lot to organize. I was feeling more cheerful, less trapped. I was even going to the gym again, though a really persistent cough dogged me for almost 2 weeks as a nasty cold ripped through our hangars and made it hard to stay motivated. My new bosses understood the job and were engaged. They worked to guide us in being better at our jobs, and gave us the support we needed. We were starting to see improvements in our interactions with the other leads and managers, and the planning organization was becoming less adversarial with us. My 10-year anniversary with Dollar Aviation Company arrived about this time, and I wisecracked about being the reason everything was going so well, and we were making record profit, and the next 10 years should be even better. Planes were going out on time, we were getting some extremely fat bonuses, and my wife had said I could learn to fly and maybe even buy a plane this spring. This year was going to be amazing. I didn't know. I just didn't know. March 25, 2020. I sat alone in the work center. I was the last production lead remaining. It had started out as a trickle, but soon a flood of my coworkers left as the leaves were being approved. I barely had a skeleton crew, with more leaving at the end of the week. Starting April 1st, I would be reduced in schedule by 25%, and I would no longer be acting in a lead capacity. I would return to being a mechanic on the floor again, joining up with the rest of the few who had not opted to take a leave of absence. We would be reassigned to my old department, intermediate maintenance, on an awful 6 days on 2 days off 8-hour day schedule. Every day we watched the passenger numbers drop sharply, and parking aircraft became a frantic activity. For example, one airline filled an entire runway at a major international airport with parked aircraft because travel was down so sharply, the runway wasn't needed anymore, and neither were those planes. Over the next month, we did pick away at the now all but abandoned check in my old bay, but we were tasked with a higher priority job: inspection of the frame 68 of the A320 series aircraft. Now, sheet metal work is not my forte, after all. Look at my flair, I'm an engine guy. That's what I do. But in this new world of madness, I do what I must, and as an A&P mechanic I have both the licensing and training to be capable of performing the work. And now, finally, we get to what makes an MFAM story for TFTS fun. What the biscuit is a frame, much less frame 68, and why was it being inspected and repaired? An aircraft fuselage, the main body, has a skeleton called stringers and frames. The stringers run lengthwise and the frames are perpendicular to the stringers, around the circumference of the fuselage. The frames are numbered 1, 2, 3, etc., starting from the very front of an aircraft and go all the way to the very last one at the tail. An Airbus 320 family aircraft has frames numbered 1 to 87, but doesn't necessarily have 87 frames. For example, an A319 will have fewer frames from an entire fuselage section being removed to make the aircraft shorter, while the A321 has additional frames inserted with the additional fuselage section that makes the aircraft longer. In both cases the frames are still numbered 1 to 87, but a 319 will skip a handful in the middle, and the 321 will actually add a decimal number, frame 35.1, 35.2 and so forth, to the frame in the extended areas. Frame 68 on an A320 family aircraft, no matter the model, is the aft doorframe of the rearmost cabin doors. The specific area of the Airworthiness Directive, AD, something from the FAA and manufacturer which absolutely must be done as directed, driven inspection were the doorstops mounted on the left and right sides of the frame. There are 7 stops per door on that side, total of 14 per door, which would help lock the door in place when the door is closed and aircraft is pressurized. When pressurized, the door latches are pressed against the stops by the internal air pressure against the door. Each of these stops has 4 bolts which attach it to the frame, and over time the torque of the stop and door when pressurized against the holes was causing damage to the structure and bolts. The directive had us pull these door stops off, check the bores of the holes on both the stop and the frame for cracks and size, and then to bring them up to a larger diameter and replace the attaching hardware. In some cases, we'd have to put a freeze plug into the frame as well to repair the hole correctly. A freeze plug is where you take out a much larger diameter circle of cracked structure and install a machined filler plug with the correct diameter hole. The original AD had been theoretically accomplished by a vendor down way south, but on subsequent re-inspections we started discovering it wasn't always performed, or sometimes was done very incorrectly. I can't answer to the reasons of why this was, but the result was every one of the planes that went through that facility coming to us for re-inspection and repair. Some of the things we discovered: holes cracked, holes undersized, never modified, holes oversized, made too big, holes oblong, too big and the bolt wallowed it out further. A couple holes resized correctly, but others on the frame untouched. One hole stop assembly completed properly, but the rest on the frame were not. A freeze plug installed, but bored out to the original diameter hole size, not the corrected hole size. Needless to say, it made time go swiftly when we did have work, but as the operation collapsed further and further, I grew more and more disheartened. Finally, mid-April, I decided I would take all of May for an unpaid leave. I wouldn't be subject to the 25% hour reduction for June, and we would be having 757 checks coming in at that point, so I'd be doing my job again. I enjoyed my month off, and to get me out from underfoot my wife, while we had decided buying a plane was unwise, she sent me out to go learn to fly. Success, got my license last month. When June came around after a restful May, I was prepared to take on the first check we would tackle during the dark summer of Rona. The plane of the beast. More from Aviation Maintenance, Götterdämmerung Part 3. The plane of the beast. Which is the name of the beast or the number of its name? That number is 666. Excerpts from the Book of Revelation 13:17b, 18b. June 2020. I've never been too superstitious, but there have been 2 aircraft in my career which have always left me unsettled. One, a CH-47 belonging to an aviation unit out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and the second, a Boeing 757. Both of which had the tail number 666. Perhaps it's being a Christian, perhaps it's culture, perhaps there truly is something dark attached to those aircraft, but they've me bothered when I've worked with them. Considering the events of my region at the end of May, perhaps the plane's arrival in town was an omen. I know for me it was a strange experience being able to see the city burning in the distance from the air as I learned to fly. Perhaps I should have taken warning from all of this when I walked in the hangar and saw the 757 tail numbered 666 squatting menacingly in the tail dock. Mayhaps it was the lights turned off throughout the building to save electricity. Perhaps it was the distinct lack of people when the place would normally be swarming. Or perhaps there truly was a spirit of malice attached to that unassuming airframe, because that is where my troubles truly began. The plane had been inducted early, so when I arrived, at 5:15 a.m., in spite of being told a 0600 start time by Rising Star, my new manager's manager, it was already on day 14 of the 30 days it was scheduled for. However, when I walked into the control center and looked at the board and loaded into our maintenance tracking program, progress was around what one would expect for day 3. The manpower labor available situation was so bad, our inspectors were having to open the panels on the aircraft themselves to perform their inspections. We received an email telling us the term manpower is no longer to be used as it is genderist and non-inclusive. Within the first couple days of my presence, I saw clearly there was no way this aircraft would meet its ready time by the 15th of the month. Seeing that the labor situation wouldn't improve until July, when the 3-month leaves of absences would be ending, and the majority of the personnel would likely return to work, management very quickly made the decision to push the release date 30 days to mid-July. I asked the manager who changed it what he'd changed it to and updated the release date in corresponding block on my turnover status report, which is used as the basis by which every shift, every day, reports on the aircraft. And so, the days of June floated lazily by. Some days the aircraft would have a couple people working it, some days they'd be all supporting line aircraft, and I'd be the only person there. The check trudged on, parts got robbed, parts went missing, and day after day little ever got done. I had stopped using YouTube and Twitch to keep me occupied in the boring moments back in January upon my return to the floor, however, and instead now I would spend my downtime studying for my pilot's license or researching agricultural drones, if there wasn't a simple and swift work card I could take and perform. At the same time, Dollar Aviation Company had released early retirement and voluntary departure packages for all non-pilot employees, delivering some very lucrative bonuses and generous insurance and benefit packages for retiring personnel, and some rather nice packages for non-retiring personnel who chose to leave. I spoke to my in-laws who run a rather large farm south of here about agricultural drones and imaging, as my wife's cousin is very involved in digital and microagronomy, with the idea of putting together a business plan and maybe taking the early out to pursue this. I'd buy the equipment with the bonus, we'd sell the house and get a camper and live out of it for the summer, and in the winter live in my in-laws' spare home. Sadly, thanks to the fact the best methods of interacting with farmers to do research and build a farming-related business, face-to-face and fairs, were no longer available courtesy of the Rona, I had to abandon it. I also thought about taking that out and leaving to be the director of maintenance at the flight school I was working with, but again, the benefits package wasn't going to be great for a family of 4. Perhaps if I were single, or if it was just my wife and I, but with 2 young children. The packages had to be opted into by a certain date in July, and if you missed it you were out of luck. You would then have until a few days before the end of the month to decide for sure, and then August 1st would be your retirement or resignation date. My wife and I came to the decision not to pursue these ideas in the beginning of July. During the rest of June, I also worked with my direct manager, whom we shall name Nutcracker because it always seemed like whatever you did wasn't good enough, or you were making mistakes in something else he wanted, to improve my turnovers and planned work lists from being fairly general to very specific in scope, performance and objective. I really appreciated the feedback and worked hard to make them better. July 2020. July 1st came and with it came mandatory 25% hour reduction for all ground employees, regardless of leaves, the return of most of my coworkers, and much of our crews. Many of those who chose to take the packages were able to stay out on leave, but there were a handful who did come in to continue working up until their very last day. It was during the first full week of the month that we came across an airworthiness directive, AD, for the forward cargo bin loading system that had yet to be performed. We had no idea what kind of a big deal it would be, so we never really put it up front to be done early. Now, the cargo bin loading system on these particular aircraft is a tray and screw style setup, where segmented trays were driven forward and aft in the cargo bin by a long jack screw. Because of the distance and the movement clearances of the trays on the screw, it could have no supports along its length, and was just supported on each end. This meant during movement, the screw could oscillate up and down, causing the attach bracket of the cargo tray to scrape the fiberglass tray through which the screw ran. The AD directed us to look at the fiberglass tray below the screw, and if there were any scratches in it, we would need to remove the entire cargo loading system, screw and fiberglass tray to inspect the frames beneath it for damage. We issued this card not fully understanding what would happen if there was a discrepancy found. There were scratches found, but they barely were through the paint to the primer on the fiberglass. Unfortunately, ADs require strict adherence, so we had to tear out that whole loading system, inspect the frames, repair everything, and put it all together while trying to accomplish the myriad of other work on the plane, support the line, and lose people constantly to catching up on training. We still made it work, but it made the visit even messier. On the Monday a week before release, I was running behind and showed up late, about 0545. I quickly dove into getting turnover from night shift and getting caught up on what happened over the 3-day weekend I had taken. Due to taking my 25% days off on Fridays, I used them to do flight lessons, and within a few minutes Nutcracker showed up to get the update on the aircraft status from me. I straight out told him, I wasn't ready yet, I'm running behind as I was a bit late this morning, and I requested to brief him before his 0630 management meeting. He accepted and left, and by 0605, I was in his office briefing him on where things stood. The night prior to release, the night manager jumped onto our aircraft routing system, ARS, to double-check the time the aircraft was set to release, and discovered an issue between it and my turnover. My turnover had it set to release at 1400, but the ARS had it in for 0800, and the ARS is the actual in-stone time. When I had updated the release date 30 days prior, I had asked the manager when he had changed it to, but not the time which I should have checked with the ARS. I had instead left it set for the time the aircraft had been previously given. And for 30 days, every shift, every lead and manager had looked at it, and not a single person, up to the director level, ever called it into question. The exact words that landed in my inbox from Rising Star, Nutcracker's boss, were, "This is an embarrassment." The aircraft did make it out on time after its 60-day visit. And I was thankful, because one of my compatriots was set up to run the next aircraft, and I would get a bit of a break. Meanwhile, the deadline for signing up for the early out passed, and 2 days later, I was called into Nutcracker's office, a Friday afternoon. "Nutcracker, you are here today, Z, as this journal entry is being entered into your file. Your performance has been far below the standards we expect, and we will be monitoring and counseling you for improvement." He handed me an official memo from Rising Star which detailed my sins. When asked about the status of specific tasks on Monday, X day of July, you were unable to provide an accurate update of tasks and plan adherence. You have been verbally coached on the specifics of your turnovers, and you were inaccurately reporting the ready time for the past month. You've been coached previously this past winter on usage of non-work related videos at your workstation. Nutcracker, your performance will be reviewed in late September to check your progress towards improvement.